Hello, good evening, and welcome to another podcast, another broadcast of Into Minds. The idea behind it is to help people through difficulties that they're experiencing. Hi, Deborah, and how they process the thoughts, how they manage their own mental health journey. And I kind of looked at it like a support group. I want to give a quick shout out this morning for the work that I did with Fortune Cookies, who's left me a lovely message, and I'll acknowledge that and say thank you. So if you're on my channel and Fortune Cookies as well, check out the work that we did this morning with the upliftment and how we deal with disappointment and things like that. And so far, it's received a really good response. Now, tonight's slightly different. This is a lot more personal to me. So this is episode 2. Don't know how long it'll go on for. I don't know how long people will stay on. And I don't know what the content's going to be, because to be perfectly honest, I haven't made any plans for this. But what I want to do is just to give you a little bit of my background and why I've chosen to go along this route, and why I'm so passionate about what it is that I want to talk about. I feel like at times I'm on my soapbox, but it's been such a strange journey. I'm 51 now, coming up 52 in a few months' time. And my first real, I don't know whether you'd call it a breakdown or not, but there's this first sort of inkling that I was different and thought different, was when I was about 15 years of age. So however my journey has turned out, it's been 36, 37 years in the making. So I first experienced the dark thoughts. I had my first suicide attempt at age 16, when I couldn't process what was going on in my head. There was various circumstances that surrounded it, and I just didn't understand who I was, what I wanted to be. In the space of a couple of weeks, I'd lost everything that I planned for, and I didn't know which way to turn. And not having the awareness of what was going on in my own head, I sought a way out that I thought would please everybody. But that was the start of it. So there's been lots of things that have gone on in my life, and I've been to various professionals to speak to them. So I feel when I talk to people on here that I'm not an expert by any means, but I'm an expert in my own life. So I have been to psychologists, psychiatrists, and all manner of therapists to help with what was going on in my mind. I had various labels given to me: depression, post-traumatic stress disorder after a riot in the prison service. And I've always done the same thing to be able to cope. I mask it. I hide behind it. I created character. I've got all of these characters that sort of roam around in my head and tell me all of these wonderful stories. And none of it, truthfully, has made any sense. It's been quite a painful experience until you come around people that say, it's okay. It's okay to be you. You know, we don't have to hide from anything. You can be in your true form. So I've had various periods on quite heavy antidepressants and anti-anxiety. Sat with very prominent psychologists in their fields, and I sat with one and I said to them, you know, is it worth carrying on with this treatment, with this counselling, with this guidance? And he said, well, why do you ask that question? I said, well, for me, there's a lot of people out there that could benefit from your time. There's a lot of people there that could probably use your experience better than what I can. And what he said to me was that you need to find your answer to that question, because I'm not going to sort of throw you out onto the street. And at that particular point, I knew that the treatment that I was having and the counselling and all of that just wasn't for me. We wasn't getting to the root of the problem. The trouble is with a lot of therapies is that they will treat the symptoms rather than what the cause was. And if the person can't articulate what the cause is, then how is the therapist going to help you make progress if you can't even describe what is actually going on? So it was one of those things that I just thought, you've just got to get on with it. You know, my upbringing was pretty much that you know, when sort of anxiety and depression reared its head, we get on with it. That's what we just do. We just cope, we just manage. So it's been a strange thing now to come full circle. So 50, when I turned 50, a couple of years ago, coming up on a couple of years ago now, there was some strange feeling in me that I was no longer going to take any shit. I was no longer going to put up with arguing and fighting with people. If people gave me the label, then that was their choice and not mine. The only choice I needed to give was whether I'd accept the label or not. But still, I've got this thing around in my head that I wasn't good enough, I was insecure, I was whatever. And all of these things started to build up again. And I just thought, I don't want to put up with this. I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to be angry all of the time. And I certainly don't want to be snapping at people for no good reason. If I'm going to have a blow up with somebody, I want to know what it's about. And even then, I will sort of structure my response to it, because all I'm interested in is having a peaceful life. But I had to ask myself, what does a peaceful life look like to me? What does a peace of mind look like to me if I've never experienced that peace of mind? And bearing in mind that at that point, we're like 35 years into dealing with these mental difficulties. And I don't know if we caught the first episode of this when I put it out before. I'm not entirely sure. But a recent bereavement triggered huge insecurities, huge upliftments, and like a wave of stuff there. And I've looked at people for support. I've looked at people there that I think can give me advice and guidance. But truthfully, and this is where I want to step in and help people, essentially, the bulk of the work to help with a mental health journey has got to be done by yourself, because people can sit and tell you that you're wonderful. They can help you re-script. They can help you reframe. But unless you truly accept that there's something there that it kind of like triggers you, and how you then take that advice and guidance to pieces and put it into your own words and into your own actions, then you're still going to be on a bumpy road. So to recap, I went out one day in September, had a lovely day out with the missus, and we like to play mini golf. So we go out and we play mini golf. We had a fab day walking along the beach, even though it was pretty cold. And I drove home. It was very, very tiring, because it was raining, and it was cold, and it was blustery. So having to concentrate driving in the dark. It's only about an hour's journey. But I got home, and my usual form is that whenever I've been anywhere, put the kettle on, let's have a brew. And I'm laid in the chair, and my eyes started to, doze, and I was nodding a little bit. And then our house phone rang. Now, in this days of mobiles and things like that, it's very rare that people have house phones anymore. But our house phone rang. And over the years, I've got the association that when that house phone rings, it's one of two types of people. It's either scammers and spammers trying to sell you something, or it's something to do with the family. So it will be parents predominantly that might want something. And it puts you on this high state of alert. Well, I know what high alert's like and hypervigilism, because of being diagnosed with PTSD, that after the riot in the prison service, it's very, very difficult to go into environments and just switch off and relax. So when that phone rings, it's like a trigger. It's an alarm bell. It's a reminder of the past. And the phone rang. My son handed it to my wife, and my wife handed it to me, and it turned out to be my mum. And my mum lives just across the other side of the estate from me. And I just heard a shout. And she just said, quite simply, I think your dad's dead, which was a real shock to the system. And I look back now and I think, My response was, "You're kidding. You're joking." Now, why would anybody say that? But your body does funny things when you've had some sort of shock or trauma. Now, this is where I want to sort of share this journey with people, that I'm not coming on here looking for sympathy or even condolences about my dad's passing, because the truth is, YouTube, Facebook, all of social media is not your diary. It's, it's not for public consumption. And this is the thing about grieving for me. If you're going to grieve, then it's a personal journey. I don't personally believe that anybody can tell you how to do it. I don't even think that the advice that some people give is worth its salt. I find that a bit of a struggle. So my thought is, with it, is to not like play it down, but tell the truth. My dad's passing is its own journey. What I want to focus on while I'm working is what it triggered in me, the response that it triggered in me. So I tell the story, and I've told the story many times over these last few months, where people are coming up, "Oh, I'm really sorry about your dad's passing," and all of this sort of thing, and do the typical response. "If you need me, I'm here. If you ever want to talk, if you ever want to get it off your chest." Truth is, I don't. I will process that in my own way. But what I found really, really interesting now is how my own mentality has started to change. So imagine that you've got your own little idiosyncrasies, your own habits, the way that you sort of, like for me, for instance, if you notice my hand, I'm quite handy when I'm talking. I gesture quite a lot. And sometimes when I'm talking, that's not always appropriate, because if you're sort of wailing your hands around with people and you're in their vicinity, it can be seen as threatening. And I'm not a threatening person. I just get very animated when I'm talking, especially when I get passionate about things. So I will sit with crystals in my hand. I will sit with rough pieces of crystal. I collect skulls. And don't worry about that. It's nothing satanic. I collect the crystal skulls, and I will often sit while I'm sort of thinking, talking, writing. I will sit with these crystals in my hand to calm that anxiety down. Now, there's another label: anxiety. Anxiety usually has a root cause. And I've sat here over these last few months and I've had extreme anxiety. Anxiety is an energy. But again, I'd like to think logically that it's got a root cause. Couldn't find a root cause for the anxiety. I wasn't reflecting or consciously thinking about Dad's passing. I wasn't consciously thinking about my processing. But imagine all of your little idiosyncrasies, habits, coping strategies, all of a sudden go and turn them up to 100. And you're faced with all of the things that trigger you, all of the things that fire you up, all of the things that, as I call it, make your teeth itch. And it's, for me, what I experienced was, it was like putting my hand into a machine with no guards on. Totally irrational, not a sensible thing to do, but I didn't know what to do with myself. All of these things were firing up. Everything went on full alert. It was like the PTSD had been ramped up to a million. And that's been long since. That's long dead and gone. So I put out on my last thing, when I was starting to look at what could be going on, I took a journey into the mind. Now, when I say I'm not a professional at anything, I'm actually a qualified hypnotherapist and a qualified NLP practitioner. But I'm a toolbox gatherer. I like to gather skills. I like to gather things there that can help me cope. I look at how you deal with depression, how you deal with anxiety. I read a lot. I look at calming the mind down. I struggle a little bit with meditation because I get too jittery. I'm one of these really naturally fidgety people. So I was sat one day on YouTube with a little bit of time to kill, and I came across this video. And I started looking at this video, and it was about neurodivergent. So I looked at what neurodivergent means, because I'd had a conversation with somebody about a year ago that was saying, have you considered that you're neurodivergent? And I'm like, no, I don't even know what it is really. But I'm one of these. I don't believe that you should ever go on to these means here and like diagnose yourself. But I watched a number of videos so that I could gain a perspective. I'm not one of these that's looking for a trophy. I'm not looking for recognition. What I'm truly looking for is how to cope. And if I find a strategy that I find that works for me, who's got this sort of thought process that goes all over the place, I would hope to share it. I would hope to bring it out to people that are looking at this now or in the future, and just say that you're not on your own. Because this has been one of the difficult things for me, is thinking that I've gone mad. I've always played the part of the madman. Anybody that knew me in the prison service, anybody that's known me outside of what I'm doing now, has always said that I'm an odd character. And I used to just play up to that role. And it's okay, because it's masking. It's a caricature to hide behind. But when you've had all of that stripped away, and you're faced now with a lot of life's hours that you'd probably put to something else, like, so when Dad's passing had gone, there'd been a lot of stuff going on in the background that I now no longer had to do. I didn't have to keep the peace. I didn't have to do anything like that. I didn't have to go visit and, all of these sort of things. So that all that time comes back to you. And as we spoke about on the broadcast this morning with fortune cookies, that your mind will fill up any gaps. And it's up to you to grab hold of them and fill it with pleasant things. Because if not, your mind will go off on a tangent and you'll be focused on all sorts of strange stuff. So I needed to do more research. So what I didn't realize at the beginning is neurodivergent is like an umbrella. So I don't know if she's actually on here today, but there's some wonderful people that help you understand things like this. Gemma's Grace talks about autistic, and she talks autism and being autistic, and she articulates her feelings that way, and it is inspiring for me to watch her progress. She's very much supportive. She vocalizes and she helps people understand her journey in her own words, and does a lot of work for that sort of recognition. Well, I looked at my particular set of sorts of circumstances and thought patterns, and I thought, no, not autistic. Don't share any of the traits. But then I started to look at ADHD, the adult version of it. I first raised this about 20 years ago. I think maybe even longer. I'm trying to think now, late 90s, that I was having quite intense counselling at the time. And I ended up with a piece of paperwork, because it was before the days of when you could go onto Google and get yourself diagnosed with anything. And I got this piece of paper. And I read this piece of paper, and it talked about adult ADHD and the research that they were doing into it. And then it put like criteria and bullet points and things like that onto it. And it was one of those, So I raised it with the counsellor, and she immediately dismissed it. Hi, wife of a grumpy old Marine. How are you? I hope you're all well, guys. Thanks for tuning in. And they dismissed it. They said, no, because you would have been diagnosed with it long before now. Well, that was the funny thing. Why would I? Why would I? If I've not made myself known to a professional, I've been being treated for depression since I was 16 years of age. But if I've not had a discussion with anybody that's allowed me to express myself fully, then why would that even be raised as a diagnosis? The potential, the possibility. So I needed a little bit more knowledge for this. So I did some tests. Am I ADHD? And in my mind, I'm running it through the process, asking myself, what am I looking for if I get that diagnosis? And I'm being honest with you guys here that's tuning in now. Mental health has been my passion and helping people since I was a very young age, purely because I don't want anybody else to suffer like I've suffered. If I can help them forward. So I want to be in that support network. I've always looked at how I can help people structure their own thoughts. But just for once, I've had to be really selfish. I don't know if it's the right word, but I've had to put myself first, which I found difficult. I'm going to be true. I'm going to be truthful about that. And I'm lucky that I've got a support network at home, and a lot of the spiritual community have just sort of come and they've allowed me to speak. They've allowed me to articulate myself, and they've not judged me. The ones that have sat in judgment or took the piss, they're no longer in the circle. I will not tolerate being belittled by anybody. I'm just not interested in engaging in that battle. So when I looked into this ADHD, I did the test, and the scores on this particular test was that, and I thought, how I'm going to do it is look at the criteria. If I am in any doubt, I'm going to score it lower than the criteria. So I'm not going to embellish it. I'm not going to make it any worse just to get a high score or get recognition in any way, collect my trophy. So I scored it, and I didn't even look at the criteria. I didn't even look at the scoreboard. Anyway, on this particular thing, there was, I think, 40 plus questions, 40 or 50 questions. Can't even remember how many there were. Shows what my brain's retaining at the moment. When I took the test, it said 17 to 20 is moderate or potentially likely to have some sort of symptoms, and that they would fit into that range. Now, like with anything, I think most people out there would probably agree that if they took a test about some sort of autistic traits, maybe certain things with your mentality that you do to cope, that tiny parts of us all are on the spectrum in some way or another. Because if you're a perfectionist, if you like things in a certain order, and if you get upskittled when your routines change, there's always that tiny part of your psyche that could be related to that, but it could take you down multiple different routes. I looked at my score, bearing in mind it was saying that 20 plus was moderate. My score was 41, right? And I'd even scored myself lower on a couple of the questions because I just wasn't sure whether it was adequate enough. So then they send you a thing for you to look at, and there's some follow-up videos and things like that. And I started to have a look into the things that I'd just naturally done to protect myself. The lots of these little traits that I've just considered normal in my life have now become stark focus. The disorganization that I feel, the ability the need to impress people. I'm a people pleaser. I will always put myself last. Timekeeping problems. There's so many different traits into it. But I then watched this other video where somebody they were being serious, but there was actually parody in the condition because they'd been diagnosed very late on. And they put on there, I think it was something 40 traits. And I sat there and I watched the video. I think you can probably find it if you're on my Facebook page. And I went through it all, and every single one of them, 25 behaviors that indicate that you're potentially ADHD. So I'd gone on there with the intent of looking at what neurodivergence was about, because for me, it was just like neuro and then divergent, which for me was heads that think differently. And I'm like, okay, maybe there's some sort of sheet there that will help with that sort of practice of getting that under control, or maybe different coping strategies or coping mechanisms. And came away realizing that neurodivergence is a banner. It's an umbrella that sort of filters down. And then you've got autism that goes off one way, and then there's loads of little things that come out of that as well. ADHD can be split into a number of different categories. So it was looking for something that suited my set of circumstances. And I'd been doing all of these things without even knowing. I'd gone from a place of just being in a real flat spot. I was very down and very depressed. And what was strange about all of this was that it was 4 or 5 weeks before my dad even passed away, when this mind, I don't know how you describe it. My mind just went into free fall. What I used to do was just not working for me. And I'd hit this low mood. Now, normally, low mood, you can have a look at what's triggering it, what's causing it. And I was doing okay. There wasn't anybody out there that was causing me any trouble. I'd not got into any past arguments or dealing with any shock or trauma or anything like that. The only thing that was around me at that particular time was a little bit of a wobble in the sense that I'd took up full-time working as a psychic medium. And I'd gone from doing the shows, which I've done for the last few years, to everything being being full-time. So I had to find work. So I was feeling the pressure. Then Dad passed away, and it just triggered like an avalanche of feelings. And I've tried discussing it with family, but I don't think family entirely are the best people to come to. You need people that are objective. You need people that will fire back at you. And what it did for me was drove me inwards, the feedback that I got, and I started to look at it. And I felt quite vulnerable when I went on there and I asked for help. But what I did was I raised awareness about something. And the amount of messages that I've had since has been nothing short of overwhelming. I am so grateful for the people that have supported me. And when I look at comments like this, what I want to give you with this. And I did touch on this morning. So you were in the audience on that broadcast this morning, that when we don't take care of ourselves and we keep giving and giving and giving, imagine that you're empty in a tank and all of your energy's coming out there. You have to take time to replenish, and you'll get a series of warnings. You might be a little bit tired, you might make a mistake, but it's nothing critical. But your body is hinting at you at that particular point that you need to take a break. You need to deal with something that's pressing, that's maybe holding you back. It's maybe a trauma, that it's maybe a trigger. Second time it comes in, it'll be a little bit more painful. It'll be a little bit more difficult to process. Third time it comes in, it's going to be something that's going to lay you out. And I'm not talking about killing you, anything like that. I'm not that morose or morbid. What I'm talking about is if you've got burnout and you don't listen. I've done it before where I've been a bit blasé about it. Everybody goes through stress and tiredness and all of the rest of it, but you just have to get on with it because that's what I was programmed to do. But when you find yourself in bed with flu or flu-like symptoms and you're laid up and you can't move, you've got no choice but to lay there and relax and process whatever's going on. So say you've got high temperature, you're sweating, you're wet through, all of this sort of thing. All you can about manage to do is the bare minimum. And yet if we'd have listened at the beginning, we wouldn't have had to have gone through the painful situation because we would have took the time out when it was necessary. So I always say to people, and I keep repeating myself because I think repetition helps it stick into people's mind, is that self-care is a necessity, not a luxury. So I started looking at what I'd been doing, and I come at it from a stage where I'm a failure, I'm a letdown. If I show weakness, this caveman is not doing his job. And one of the comments that has stuck with me, my relationship with my mum is brilliant, but we tend to end up going around subjects that are personal and things like that. And I sat there in her energy with her, and she looked at me, and we'd been round after Dad's funeral and things like that. And we sat and had a conversation, and I said, "Do you know what, Mum?" I said, "I've got nothing, right? I've got nothing, no energy, absolutely nothing left in me. I got no fight. I got no wherewithal. I got no direct energy. I was feeling burnt out. I'm the first person that if I see somebody come on here that's my friends or people like that will like send you out healing. I will spend loads of time at fairs giving myself energetically away because I can't stand seeing people upset. I can't stand people being put upon or bullied, and I give my energy freely." And I was driving home from an event, and I got a blinding headache. And then I looked at why I'd got a blinding headache, because it's my need to please. I can't let anybody see the weakness, so I'm masking. I'd not had anything to drink that day, even though I'd got water sat there. We all need to replenish the water, whether we like it or not. We're such a big percentage of us is fluid that we need to keep those fluid levels up. I'd not eaten because I thought, well, I'm not worthy enough of spending money on myself if I'm not earning money. And this is where it starts. Your mind can start to twist up and become your enemy. It really can. And not being strong enough at that particular time to just go, right, hang on, no. Stepping in and saying, no, I need to look after myself. So I'll go home and I immediately speak to Mrs. P, who is amazing. She's the battery charger. She comes in and we sit there and we talk it all through. And she'll ask the questions. Have you looked after yourself today? And the answer's always no. So I've started to realize now that I've been doing this self-sacrificing thing as well. You know, it's almost like laying yourself out on an altar. Somebody made a comment the other week about if you're prepared to put yourself above the parapet, prepared to be shot at. And I considered, I've had my head above the parapet for the last 35 years and I've been shot at consistently. And has the energy that I've invested in other people been always returned? No, it hasn't. But I've not considered that until I've got to the point of having nothing left. I'm not angry. I'm not upset. I'm not grieving. I'm not depressed. I haven't got these labels. I've got nothing. And I'm just sat there with the gauge on nothing. And I am, truthfully, I'm struggling to function. So I thought, I need answers to this. So I'm doing my research, and lo and behold, the ADHD thing comes up. All throughout my life, what I've had to say, what's like bubbling up inside of me. I don't always take turns with people in the sense of that I will automatically jump in because I've not got that handbrake on me that says, whoa, I'll hold your turn. I've got to get that in before it goes away. I've realized that there's issues with processing as well, that I am on the go mind-wise from the second I wake up to the second I go to bed. It is an exhausting process, right? So it's irrelevant things that run through your head. So I'll be having a conversation with you, and I fully admit this, and this might sound a bit sexist because the majority of my viewers are ladies, that I can't multitask. So I will have 30,000 different bits going through my head at any one time, and none of them have got any real strategy attached to them. I kind of just do my best to drown that bit out while I focus on that little bit. But I often find that I'll come back to cold cups of tea because I've made the cup of tea and gone into the room to do something else. And as I've gone into the room to do something else, I've done another 2 or 3 jobs. And then what tends to happen with me as well, and I've only just started learning that I've been doing this for a long time, is say you're presented with a lot of choices and you know that certain amounts of them have got to be done. They've got to be processed. There's certain important things that we've had dealing with legal paperwork and 1 or 2 bookings and things like that where I've got to get paperwork transferred across. But it's been too much of an effort. So what I've done is I've gone, I'll do none of them. And I've gone and sat down and procrastinated because my to-do list has got too much. So what I'm finding now is with anything that I do is that I write myself a list. And there's talked about coping strategies and things like that. And what I look at now doing is I make a list and I do as much as I can. I make myself accountable. I put a video on here a few days ago, the ABC, the accountabilities. Bollocks to any of the doubters and people that cause me anxiety or anything like that. And then that allows myself to make those changes. And that is now what goes through my head. That is one of my now coping strategies. I openly acknowledge that I sit with things where I've got where I've got things that I need to focus on. So I will sit with things while I'm focusing on that. So the crystal thing there, I don't hide it anymore. That is what I need to cope, because it just calms that anxiety. I will watch something and I'm not paying attention to it. Quite often I'll have the TV in the background on, and what it is to the characters that seem to come out that help me manage are distracted by outside noise and things like that. So that allows spirit and the spirit energy coming through. Now, people could look at this, if they're uneducated, don't know me, and say, oh, that's traits and elements of schizophrenia. But let me explain that. Let me explain this about the characters. There's a comic over here, because I noticed there's quite a few of you guys on from overseas. There's a comic over here called The Beezer, many years ago. And in there was characters called the Numbskulls. And the Numbskulls operated, I can't remember the guy's name. I think he was, let's say Stuart off the top of my head. They operated Stuart. So in there was the thought box. It's like a suggestion box, but in the suggestion box, the thoughts would go in there and they would operate Stuart. We need to go to the shop. We need to go and put the kettle on. We need to do whatever. And then when he was fed through the mouth, and there would be some numbskulls in the stomach region, and they would be feeding the stuff down his throat, and then it would go into the stomach, and then they would be feeding it, and doing all the processes. And that fascinated me, that I wondered at that particular time, was there anything like that going on in me as a kid? Really strange, because when you suffer from mood swings as well, and there's no explanation why, you think, well, maybe it's chemical. Maybe it's a chemical imbalance. But then when you start to realize that you can invent a character when you're in a place of discomfort. And what I found over sort of when I go introspectively is looking at the second I start to feel anxious, or that I'm on the spot with somebody, and I'm talking in my everyday life, that I tend to go silly. I can tend to go really off the cuff, and I start becoming, as it was so eloquently put by somebody, the performing monkey. And I do, and that's what I've done, because it keeps people away from my idiosyncrasies, the things that I'm embarrassed about, the things that I don't want to talk about, the things where I don't trust people enough to get that close, that will sit with me without judgment. Because my experience has been, when you open up to people, you tend to get crushed. So you become very reserved in that way. So that character takes a back seat. It's not like I'm hearing voices all of the time, but I do have these things where these characters step forward. There's what I tend to now know as the narrator. And the narrator has got a storyline that he reads. Now, that storylines come from somewhere. And there's a process when you look at NLP, when you start to look at how you process things, like if you take on a task, asking yourself where those instructions came from. So if you've had let's just say you've had a poor upbringing and you've been bullied and things like that, your narrator will be telling you the story that you're not good enough. Why are you even bothering to do that? Because it's going to be a waste of time and you're going to end up struggling. So you might as well step down, go about and do something else. If you've been traumatized in some way or another, well, you're never going to make it any further than that, because this trauma will hold you back. You're depressed, you're anxious, you're whatever. And this character carries on and on and on. So I spend a lot of time working with people to find out who's writing on their walls, because it was something that was explained in NLP. Because who's written on your walls is also providing instruction for you. So it's important to check in with yourself regularly as well, to find out if what you're doing as a process is under your guidance and instruction, or is it as a trigger from the past? Is it from your mum and dad? Is it from an older version of you? So sometimes we just have to take those rest periods and just go, right, am I actually in that state of panic? Because this is my version. This is my life. This is how it affects me. So when people come to me for guidance and counseling, I sit there and I try and get into their psyche. I'm never going to be one that's going to offer instruction, because that has never worked for me. But I will go into the dark with you while you hold that torch. Because I have found over these last sort of 6 months in particular that there's been people out there that have been only too willing to provide an explanation, show me their experiences. And I'm one of these that thinks, well, I'd like to pay back to everybody that helps me. I've had some fantastic offers of help. People there that I wouldn't even know that they've been on a similar sort of journey. And I want to make it more accessible. I want to make it where that we help people. When I say we, I mean all of my different characteristics. And what was explained to me, how the head works with somebody who's had an official diagnosis of ADHD, it was like having a carousel of windows. And depending on what you're thinking, that carousel is moving really quickly. So you'll have a little bit of a window into this, a little bit of a window into that, a little bit of a window into that. But there's a boss at each window. And I was trying to get my head around how I actually process thoughts and things like that. And another thing that popped up on one of these videos on YouTube was thinking about how you process thoughts. That most people, and you're called neurotypical, which is the majority of people, will have what is known as a managing director who makes all of the decisions, but he will have a secretary. And what the secretary does is filter out all of the stuff that's not necessary. We'll put it in order for him to consider before he takes the action. So he's the one that's going to feed the guy that we were talking about earlier on. He's going to pass on the message and he's going to decide what's important and what's not. When you're neurodivergent, we don't have that filter. And I'm saying we because I've diagnosed myself this. And what I believe is that if you start to get a thought into your head and you cement it in, you become that scenario. So in my head, whether I've been told professionally or not, neurodivergent and adult ADHD, because that's what makes most sense to me at this moment in time. I don't have a secretary. I have so many thoughts going through my head. It's difficult. I don't know what to focus on. I get very, very nervous because people will come at me and say, I've told you this. And I'll go, did you? I can't remember people. This is another thing. I know lots of people will probably experience this, where somebody will come at you. Can you remember when we did? Right. But the amount of people that I actually see, I'll run you through a typical scenario. So somebody comes up to me that I part recognize, and something that I've said to them or something that I've done in the reading has obviously made an impact on them, so that they come back and remind themselves to me. I then go into what I call free fall. It's almost like having to man the lifeboats, because as soon as that sentence is uttered, this is what happens in my mind. This is an insight into how I process. I go into a state of panic internally. I'm not going to show it because for me, in my head, the thought is that's non-professional. I'm racking my brains then to try and find who that person is. I never forget faces, ever. But the thought process doesn't always keep up with recognizing who that person is. I've got the image, but I haven't got the connection. So I should start going through what I call my mental Rolodex, where I start trying to place these people where I've been. Now, again, part of having a neurodiverse mind in ADHD is that I've had 30 different jobs since I left school, because I can't settle to anything for long enough to lay down, I don't know, discipline. I just don't settle well enough. I'm jumping from one thing to another. So I don't recognize this person for quite a long while. And then what's going on in my mind with the thought process is, right, I hope they don't think that what they're saying to me is not important enough for me to remember. Oh, I'm embarrassed about that because I've been ignorant. That person's made the effort to come and see you and you can't even be bothered to remember them. So then there's an internal battle going on, because there's another part of me, the character, that's going, they're not even thinking that. They've just come to acknowledge the impact that you had when you had that conversation. But it's like a massive sword fight going on in my mind, because there's the logical thinking mind there that just goes, right, we're in this moment here and now. If there's an issue, that that person will be adult enough to turn around and say, I can't believe you didn't recognize me. But the narrator is playing upstairs and just going, well, that's typical of you, isn't it? Right? You just don't value people. So the mind comes back with, are you taking the piss? You know, I value everybody. I value all of my, every single client that I've had an interaction with. Some higher than others, admittedly, because you're always going to get critics. But the head is in a constant battle. And when your head's in a constant battle, that is exhausting. It is absolutely exhausting. So you come to the point where you've got nothing left. So I come on here because what I found with this is it's great. I've got, I think it's 271 subscribers as of today. And I want more, right? I want more. So if you can help me by liking and subscribing to anything that I put on, even if you don't want to stop and watch for very long, because the idea is to help support other people. Right? Because one thing I am very, very good at is being a bodyguard and somebody that sits there in your thoughts that will help you out. The strategies that I've developed through experience help other people. Because if you inject humor into things, which is something I'm very, very good at, is injecting humor into things, it will distract the mind. Because I think what happens is when you get into a place of stress, if you imagine fight or flight to me represents, have I got to run away from something, or have I got to have a fight with something and protect myself? Either way, all non-essential services are shut down, which includes the brain. So the brain can't form any logical thoughts because there's no supply to it. So when I go into this meltdown phase, I've somehow got to bring myself down. Now, this can happen at any point. So what I look at doing with any of the therapies that I do with people is breaking the current state of behavior. If you can get the person to just forget for just a few seconds, distract them, make them laugh, you can then get them to refocus. Because we're looking down a tunnel when we're in panic. We're just like we're hyper focused. And there's another trait of ADHD and neurodivergence is hyper focusing. When you're hyper focusing, it's at the expense of everything else. So you may well have started 20 different jobs, but none of them will get completed until you've completed the task that you're hyper focusing on. That has been me for years. I have got so many half started and half finished jobs. It's beyond belief. And I say over the course of these last 6 months, it's been incredibly difficult because it's all been going past me and over my head. So I've had to rebuild. I've had to refocus. I've had to rejuvenate myself. And I think as well, what it is, it's not putting yourself in a place of pressure, because I think pressure is this self-perpetuating thing that you put yourself, I'm under pressure. But are you really? It's a case of not being a performing monkey. You know, be true to yourself. Take time out for yourself and care for yourself. Grieving on its own. Grieving takes a lot of energy out of you. So that needs whatever focus that you want to give it. The live grieving that we spoke about this morning on when I did the live with the lovely Annabelle, the fortune cookies, we spoke about filling in the what we call potholes. That all takes focus. But you can't do any of that work until you accept what is going on around you. Whether I'm ADHD, neurodiverse, or whatever, I'm still in the frame where I'm going to help people while I've got that breath in my body. This is my, I don't know, it's my manifesto. It's an ongoing journey. A lot of it that I don't understand. A lot of it that I'm really having to sort of look down the barrel of a gun with things. But I found something that I didn't really know that I was looking for recently. I found an admiration for myself, because all of this time where I've been saying that I'm not good enough, I haven't done the right thing by people, I feel guilty about things. I carry a lot of guilt around with me. I carry a lot of remorse around with me in the sense of that I've not done better with my life. And then when you've got nothing left and you actually do that review and you go a little bit introspective, you realize just how much you've actually accomplished by keeping all of that under the surface. You know, I played the clown for that long. One of the things I was looking at this morning, and another trait of it is masking. And the way that the guy put it across was that if you get one of those Russian dolls with all of the little dolls inside, then originally you start out as you. Somebody then comes out at you with some criticism or some bad news or some trauma or something like that. So you put a shell around it, you put the next layer on, and then something else happens. You get lots of different stimulus, you get lots of different energy thrown at you. You want to protect yourself. You don't want to ever be seen as weak. So you put another layer on. Then relationships break up, people pass away, so you put another layer on until somebody actually shines the torch in your eyes one day and just goes, right, just stop there a minute. Right, I want to talk to the original you. Right, what does that mean? So the way that I took it when it was done to me, I came out with the obvious answers. Who are you? The question that was posed to me was, I went, I'm Rick Paul. Yes, but who's Rick Paul? Because Rick Paul is a name. And I went, yes, okay. So I'm Rick Paul, spiritual, medium, psychic, thought therapist, which was the latest labels I've given myself. Right, okay, let me take them off you. Who are you? I said, well, father of 3 children, married, brother, son, friend, confidant, guide, spirit guide, whatever it is that you want to know yourself as. Right, let's take away all of them. Who are you? And the truth was, and the truth is, I didn't know. I hadn't got an answer. I spoke to somebody for clarity who said that was an unfair question. I disagree. I thought it was brilliant because it stripped back all of the candy floss. It stripped back everything to raw and put me in that space of saying, who am I? Am I Rick Paul at 51 that is just living for the now moment, or am I Rick Paul that's got 51 years of life experience? And again, I hadn't got the answer, because there was nothing left in me. There was nothing that I could actually look at and say, yes, this is me. This is what I represent. So what I'm looking at doing now is all of the different roles that I play is pulling them all in together, bringing them all in, using all of the skills that I've gained over these 51 years, the good, the bad, and sometimes the downright ugly, to help uplift people, because that is my dream. That is where I want to spend my life's hours. But what I've had to do is tail it back a little bit by saying I can't always give that 100% because I haven't got it to give. I refuse now to put myself in negative energy, as in minus energy, just because I feel bad for somebody else. It's not my role. It's not my role. So the joy of being an empath is amazing. That when you speak to people and that you can be part of their recovery process, it is brilliant, but not at your own expense. And this is what I'm having to learn. It's a simple answer. No, I'm no longer going to do that. I'm no longer going to play that role. I'm stripping right back to find out who that person was that has encased himself in all of these things. I'm looking at my coping strategies, that when I deal with this agitation and this anxiety, and I'm not beating myself up. I'm not going to get upset over it. I'm not going to get angry over it. I'm just going to be. I'm going to be a human being rather than being a human doing. Because we've got to take care of this vessel, because this is the one that we've got. You need to maintain it. You need to look after yourself. And it's not an easy task. So I'm coming up on 53 minutes. I had no script, which is usual for me. And all I'll just say to you is that I am preparing a talk, and at some point I'll probably record it and put it on here. And it's called, and this was probably one of the big turning points for me, climbing out the candy floss machine. That I knew that something wasn't quite right with me and I wanted to change it, but I'm surrounded by all of this conditioning. I'm surrounded by these excuses. I'm surrounded by this procrastination. I've got any amount of these sort of thought bubbles going on and around me. And I went, It's all candy floss. And if you imagine candy floss itself, if it's stuck to your face like this, it's real because it's there, but you can't see your true potential. You can't see your way fully forward. So the talk and the thought was to climb outside the candy floss machine, stand there, wash myself down, and see what was left behind all of the excuses, all of the reasoning, all of the coping strategies, and find the true me. So as I come to the end of this, thank you for anybody that's taken time out of their life's hours to sit and watch me. I've been watching the X-Files from episode 1. And what I'm going to leave you with is a couple of thoughts. The truth's out there somewhere. Keep shining and don't sweat the small stuff. Blessings out there to all of you that need that healing energy. Be your own true self. And please, as I say, like and share all of the wonderful people that come on here and contribute to this. So he's not here tonight, but people like Foxy, go onto their channel, Annabelle at Fortune Cookies, The Fitness Hutch, Trevor Coult, Gemma, Embracing Aging, to name but a few. Give them all your love and support that you pass across to me. And I'm sure that there'll be a lot of growth on this channel over the coming time. If there isn't, I'm not going to worry too much because I'll reach the people that I need to reach. So on that, I'm going to say blessings to you all. Thank you and good night. Thank you.